All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Brutally Honest Loan Officers podcast. I am Derek Brown, and this is
Stephen Brock.
Hey, Stephen.
How you
To
doing?
everybody listening, we are loan officers in Florida. We both work at the mortgage firm, and we have a little podcast where we discuss different topics related to mortgages and real estate. So happy to have you listening. Stephen, how's it going, man?
It's going good. I think this is going to be a good podcast today. Kind of busting some myths that are out there about home buying that maybe because we see it every single day.
Right.
I'm like, how do people keep thinking this? But they do. And it's our job to educate people to make not the right decision, to make educated decisions with the correct information. And today we'll be able to kind of further step that into reality.
Debunking home buying myths. That is our episode today. So let's just get right into it. You need a perfect credit score to buy a home. Stephen?
It helps, but no, you don't.
So can you buy a home with a 400 credit score?
You could
Cash.
technically.
Can you get a mortgage with a 400
Yeah.
credit score? That one might be difficult.
Yeah, so yeah, it would be different. I mean, what I think the only traditional loan program out there that doesn't actually have a minimum credit score is VA. I mean, the mortgage company itself sets that with
Right.
it. So I mean, technically you could still on that, but I mean, you got to realize is your credit score is showing your ability to pay things back. So if it's in the dumpster,
Yeah.
if you could get it at 400, it's not going to be pretty at all.
Right. Yeah. I think what a lot of people, there's definitely thresholds that you want to like try and get above, and if you're at like a 679, it might be beneficial to try and get above 680. So there's different tiers where pricing improves per your credit score. But I was talking to a friend the other day that she was hesitant about having her credit pulled, and then I pulled it, dude, 780. And I was like, what? And she's like, oh, I thought it was a little bit worse. And I was like, even a little bit worse is still like above 700 is great.
Yeah.
Like that's great. You definitely want to try and be above 620. Next tier is 640. And then depending on the loan programs we're trying to do, sometimes they require you to be a little bit, higher. But as far as perfect credit, no, you don't need
not
to
at
have
all.
perfect credit.
And
But it
usually when
does
we're
help.
looking at somebody's credit and they're a little bit lower than where they need to be at, it's usually a simple fix. It's like, hey, I would say 90% of the time, it's like, hey, this credit card's maxed out.
Right.
Like you need
Pay
to
down.
get it, at least get it under 90% because people don't realize anything over 90% on your credit card is maxed out. So like get it from that. That's your first threshold to get it down. And that could
Yep.
sometimes jump you a couple of points there. And then, we can look at other thresholds. I mean, sometimes people just need straight credit repair and it's a couple of months to a year process. But
Right.
waiting and not knowing is hurting your chances even more.
Yep. Couldn't agree more.
So we went over credit score. So next one is you must have 20% for a down payment.
That is
Is that true?
accurate.
That's
No,
accurate.
it's not. You don't need 20% down. Again, it's one of those situations where it might help. It might help you get to, the payment that you're looking for. But you can put as little as 3% down for conventional loans, 3.5 FHA, 0% down for VA and USDA. And so then it just, it really kind of depends on what you're wanting to put more money down. Like, what's the reasoning behind putting more money down? Talking with another customer the other day, they have an easy 10% down and that leaves them with plenty of money in the bank. But they were like, well, what about like if we put 20% down so that we don't have to pay mortgage insurance? And I was like, that's the only reason. It's because you don't want to pay mortgage insurance on your conventional loan. And they were like, well, yeah, the mortgage insurance was $80. That's it. It was $80 per month. So then when you think about the chance that they could potentially have it removed after 2 years, that's $1,920 that they'll pay in mortgage insurance. And yet they were going to consider putting another $40,000 down in order to save less than $2,000. So for that specific reason, maybe you don't. You know,
I think
but
you definitely you have to look at the numbers and figure out which way is the, you know, the 20% down could be beneficial for you, but like you said, like what could they do with 40 grand over the next 2 years? Like even if they put that
invested elsewhere, you
in
know,
like the least amount or the lowest yielding interest savings platform can
right.
make them the 2 grand.
Right. So you don't need to, but also if you're trying to get a lower payment, stuff like that, then yeah, you might. So it really just depends. Um, and I mean, I think the part of it too is if somebody has the idea that they have to put 20% down and they have 5% plus closing costs or whatever, how long would it take for them to get to the 20%? That time of waiting until they get 20%, they might miss out on a ton of homes that they could have bought, you know, sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily want people to wait until they have the 20% just because they want to put 20% down. You might miss out on a ton of appreciation. You know, the equity you could have a home if you bought it 3 years sooner is incredible. So that's one other reason why I would consider like looking at the numbers prior to having 20% down.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right that you don't actually need that 20% down with it. You need to actually, same thing as credit, like you need to run it all and look at all the options. Like we can look at the 20% down option. We can look at the 3.5, 0, depending on what it is, 10%, 15%, you know, running each scenario and then making the best decision for yourself. Kind of
But
thing.
if you've got a bunch of money saved and you want to put 50% down, yeah, you can do that. I'm not saying don't. Um, but for those that are, you know, trying to save to the 20% and it's holding them back from buying, you might want to reconsider.
So kind of going over that part, like they're waiting. So most people that are doing this have usually not bought a home before. So they're waiting for that 20% down. So is it always throwing money away?
Not always. Technically, if you think about what's my interest rate on renting, it's 100. Everything you pay in rent, you're not building equity, you're paying off somebody else's mortgage. Yeah. So, but you know, we just went through a podcast on that topic of sometimes it's a good idea to rent, sometimes it's not. Um, you know, should you always buy instead of renting? No, it's not always, you know, the best option. Depends on personal and financial circumstances. Um, yeah, so that's where that's renting is not always throwing your money away in the sense of, you know, you should always buy instead of renting. Not the case.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Are you not gaining equity because you're renting? Yes. Are you really just throwing it out the window for no reason? No, it depends on your life, what that money is actually kind of, you know, going towards. Like you said,
Right.
our other podcast, we went over it for several minutes of why it could be better to rent than to buy. And you guys could kind of go over that and listen to that one with it, but it doesn't always make perfect sense to buy kind of thing.
Correct. So then kind of same category or whatever. Spring is the best time to buy a home. Stephen, before you answer, I'm going to say yes, spring is the best time to buy a home. Everybody listening, please reach out to Derick and Stephen to get pre-approved to buy a home this spring. Go do it right now.
And if you're listening in the summer, the fall, or winter, those are the best
Yeah.
times to buy too.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
I don't think it's always the best time to buy. Now, do we see a surge of buyers coming? There's always there's always a surge. I would say maybe Florida's different, but I always see a surge in the spring market. It just seems people, you know, coming
Spring and summer,
down,
more homes get
do
listed.
stuff.
The inventory, more inventory comes to the market in spring and summer. And
Yeah,
I believe a majority of that is because of school.
yeah. So people
So
want to
we've
be in that
got
certain school district before school
families are wanting to
starts.
move
So
because of school districts. They have a young child that will be going to middle school next year. They want to buy a house in a different school district, you know, or high school or whatever. So that's what I've seen be a driving factor in some of the inventory. But I also think that some people just think that, you know, it's a better time to buy. So more listings become available. So more inventory comes.
yeah, I don't think it's always the best time to buy. That's not that. So we're kind of debunking
The
that myth. It's
best
not the
time to
best.
buy is when you are financially ready.
Exactly. No matter what time of year it is, when you are ready, it's a personal choice, but that's when it matters most.
Right.
All
All
right.
right.
So you want to take it? Take it. Go ahead.
The next home buying myth. The only upfront cost is the down payment.
Yes.
Wrong.
Oh, geez, I knew I should have studied this. You're
No,
right.
there are a ton of other expenses. Well, I shouldn't say a ton. I don't want to scare anyone. But just other expenses that they need to be aware of. So there's closing costs, prepaids. That typically goes in with your down payment to a total cash to close.
Those are
You
the three,
also
the
have,
three, the three main ones in a mortgage:
right,
down payment, closing cost, and your
prepaids.
yeah, your prepaid escrows. A lot of people get confused when they hear um the closing costs and prepaid and escrows. They are two separate things. Now, your cash to close is all three of those combined,
Right.
minus anything you've already paid in, upfront. Um, but I think I see it all the time. And they're like, oh, they told me my closing cost is only like 10 grand. And you're telling me it's, 16, 17. And I'm like, well, your closing costs were, that small, which is
That
the
seems
title.
expensive.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it
Well,
depends on
I mean,
purchase
throwing
price.
numbers out there, but it's like you see they don't realize their cash to close includes the insurance, the taxes we're collecting up front, the interest before
Correct.
their first payment that has to be collected. And it's just because nobody's ever explained it to them and broke it down, the numbers of, anybody I get pre-approved, we break it all down. So they can see exactly where every dollar is being spent. And then we also, add a little buffer in there, make it a little higher because I'd rather you think that you have to come to closing with
Right.
more money and come with less than the other way around.
Right. So then outside of that's all mortgage related.
Yep.
What about outside the mortgage? You paying for anything?
Yeah. You have your inspection, which I mean, we're going to get
Inspections?
inspection on that. We'll get into that. Your moving expenses, it's not free to move. I mean, unless you still got to rent a truck, but unless you have your own U-Haul truck and you have a big family, still
Yeah, I
costs a
mean, if you
little.
got a truck and a trailer, you might be able to do it for free, but it still might cost you pizza and beer to get some friends to help.
Yeah.
You know.
Make sure you pay them after. Don't give them the beer before. Nothing will
Yep.
get done. Yeah.
Yeah, so I
So
mean there are other upfront costs that come in, especially the inspection. We can kind of dive into that, mortgage myth. Home inspections, are they optional? You know,
legally, yeah, they're
yes.
optional.
You are not required to have a home inspection to purchase a home. We even have like a stop form in all of our documents saying that it's recommended that you get a home inspection. But like as the mortgage lender, we don't require you to. However, in more recent years here in Florida, you almost have to if you want to get insurance. You've got to,
Yes.
provide a 4 point and a wind min on anything that's older than like 4 years old. So that's as far as required, no. And it also might be foolish because some people think, well, I'm getting an appraisal done. That's the inspection. That is not. An appraiser will walk into a room, measure like how big it is, turn the light on, turn the light off, and walk out.
Yep.
An inspector is going to go in, see some peeling wallpaper, peel it a little bit more. Why is it peeling? Look behind it, finding moisture. There's water, dampness here. Is that from a leak? They look through everything as diligently as possible to try and find anything that, would cause you to not want to buy the house, I guess. I mean, but looking for any
So
repairs, any,
what if
major
the
issues that you may not see with, your normal eye.
so what if the house passes inspection? So it's perfect now, right?
Oh, I mean, you can pass an inspection and still have slight issues.
Yeah.
I have
I
never
don't I
seen
don't
an
think there is
inspection
an
report
act
that had zero issues.
I don't think there is a pass or fail on an inspection. I know there's going to be like, hey, you might not get insurance.
I've seen some fails. I,
You don't fail it. It just tells you what it is.
yeah,
I
touche.
mean, because if you're buying it cash and you do an inspection and you're just like, hey, the roof is caving in. Well, hey, I already know this. I'm still buying it. I'm going to fix it and move on. Like, now,
Right,
would you get insurance during that? No, till that roof is done.
right.
So there's not really necessarily a pass or fail on it, but just because the list, once the inspection is completed, doesn't mean the house is in perfect condition. Now, a great inspector will go in there and won't be an alarmist and say like, hey, here's this, in Florida, you get settlement cracks, like, oh, there's a little crack on the outside of the house. They're like, oh, like the house is falling apart. We have foundation issues. I'm like, Florida's a sand zone, so it's just settling, you know. Maybe you want to patch it and fill it in so water can't get through that crack. But um, a lot of inspectors will just go over with them and like, hey, you're owning a home. Here's your honeydew list of things that are minor that
Right.
you need to bring attention to. Now, things can come up where, hey, the AC is going to go out. Hey, there's a leak in the roof. There's actual major issues, and that's where you have to negotiate on either having it repaired before the closing, or that's your time to say, hey, you know what, this house isn't for me. There's too much work that needs to be done, and I'm backing out of it.
Right. Well, and also like let's not forget about like some health and safety issues that inspectors find.
Yes.
Behind, wall A, there's some moisture. Why is there moisture? It looks like there's been a leak, and the leak has been leaking for quite a while, but you can't see it from just looking at the wall. And next thing you know, there's some mold behind that wall, and yet it's going through the AC unit, and you're just spreading mold spores throughout the house.
Yep.
You want to be aware of that.
Yes.
Because like now, does that mean you don't buy the house? Well, most people probably would back away if that were the case. However, you could do mold remediation, have it, completely cleaned up and remediated, and have a perfectly good house once it's fixed. But
Yeah.
that's something like, especially me with my family. I mean, I wouldn't want to live in it, but I also don't want to, put my kids through that. So, or my wife.
I think it's just when you get the report is to review it and make sure what you're comfortable with doing. Now, this is for basic, I guess, conventional loans or anything else, but like FHA and VA, certain things will come up on the inspection that has to be addressed, especially, VA. You have your WDO, which
Right.
people just think termite report. Oh, you gotta have a clear termite report. No.
No. Wood destroying organisms.
Yes.
And water, technically, could be a wood destroying organism.
Yep. You get wood rot. I mean, and it's usually a simple fix. They cut it out, they replace it, done. But a veteran cannot buy a house that does not have a clear WDO inspection report.
Right.
So it has to be fixed. So, I think I've in all my years, I think I've had it one time that termites were in one, and they were just in one section, and it was an easy fix. But usually, it's wood rot on like the fascia, around the edge of the roof and stuff like that. That
Yeah, I've
people
had it
say,
on a couple of houses where it's around like the door, door
yeah,
jams and stuff like that, which is honestly just a couple pieces of wood and you're good.
yeah, they cut it out, put the new wood in there, paint it, done.
Yep.
Simple. Take a picture of it, send it to the inspector, or the inspector comes back out, looks at it, says, "Yep, it's not there anymore," and now it's clear. So since the house is never in a perfect condition, what about if it is a new build? Do you need that? That should be perfect, right?
Talk to my buddy Rick. Rick is the local home inspector who would slap you in the face for saying that. We have found like serious issues on new construction homes. So regardless of the age of the home that you were buying, you should get a home inspection.
Yes.
And obviously, like we want every inspection to come back perfectly clear, no issues, but it's just rare. But you would be surprised some of the stuff that like our inspections have found on new construction. Like it blows my mind. And you can also do like all different types of inspections, pre-drywall, like all different things through the building phase
Right. Yeah.
too. So most builders should be confident enough to say, by all means, have an inspection done. If any builder is like, no, we don't want you to do that, that might be a red flag.
Yeah, I think what you said, most builders should let you come in there and do it. And half the time, you got things like they're not 24/7 on all their employees watching them. People are human. They make mistakes. They cut corners at times, which they shouldn't, but they do. that, even the home builder, the main person might not even know about it. So when you're doing an inspection, it comes up like they need to know
Right.
themselves. Like, do they hire a crappy employee that's cutting corners without them knowing it?
Right.
So yeah, I definitely. And then, like you said, there's different types of inspection. So there's also that, 10-month, 11-month inspection before their warranties are done from the builder. They
Right.
have the house inspected again, and like, hey, here's items that need to be addressed that you can take back to the builder to cover under warranty. So
Yeah, and you can typically you get a home warranty when you buy new construction. Um, is it a good idea to get a home warranty on an older home?
it can be a wise investment, I think, depending on the age of the home, depending your comfortability of fixing certain things. Uh, some inspection companies offer this in a package with their inspections. I know, like
Right.
most inspectors in Florida, they have like a couple months warranty on things that they inspect, and then like on the roof and stuff. Um, but you can extend that warranty too, and it's fairly cheap because one, you've already had a professional inspect it,
Right.
so the warranty knows what's going on with the property when they're, I guess, underwriting it for it.
Right.
So it can be pretty cheap to have it done, just to have it as protection if anything does come up in between that time. Because I feel like I could have a house, the AC work perfectly fine for that owner forever. As soon as I buy it, like the next month it goes out. Like it's just
Right.
Murphy's Law on things. So yeah,
Oh
I
yeah.
think it would be, you just gotta have, it's a peace of mind if it fits into your budget and have it. I think it's a great thing to do.
All right. Next home buying myth. The asking price is non-negotiable.
Yes. Can't negotiate. I hope everybody
No,
realizes I have like a
no.
tongue in cheek with all these.
Yeah, I know. So the list price when you're looking at a home and it's listed for $549,000, and you think, well, that's what we have to offer in order to get the house. Absolutely not. No, everything is up for negotiations.
That's what they're asking for.
Most sellers are, expecting negotiations to happen. If you have the absolute most perfect home in a beautiful neighborhood and you list it below what it's worth, well, then you might just be looking at whoever comes in the highest. But for the most part, sellers are trying to get the most of what they can. And I mean, that purchase price is completely up for negotiation. So, and lately we've been getting really creative with some of our negotiations. Yeah. So I
Yeah.
would say that is a myth worth debunking. The list price is definitely negotiable.
Yeah. I've seen some people where they want to offer lower than the listing price or the asking price. And then they go back to the seller and say, well, we wanted to offer lower, but we actually will offer you your listing price, but we want a seller concession back.
Right. So if it's listed at 500,000, we're thinking about offering, 485. Well, instead they offer 500 and ask for $15,000 in a seller credit. That then you can pay to buy down your rate, cover your portion of your closing costs, basically save $15,000 out of pocket.
Exactly. So
So it
it,
really
it's
just depends.
it's definitely not. Yeah, it's definitely not negotiable. What? How do you say that? Non-negotiable. Not non-negotiable. That's too
It
negative.
is
But it's negotiable. There
negotiable.
you go.
Jesus, Stephen.
I mean, I was all over the place with that one. I needed Jesus for that one.
Yeah.
Well,
Stephen struggles with words.
don't have me spell it. So going on that, the negotiation. Now, do you need a real estate agent to help you?
I'm
So
not even going to joke on this one. Yes, you do. However, technically, so the home buying myth, I guess, would say you don't need a real estate agent to buy a house. Technically, it's true. But in my experience, I have seen more issues with people trying to do FISBOs and not have realtor representations. I am a big fan of buyers and sellers using real estate agents. Just the value that they bring is incredible in my mind. Just working on the mortgage loan originator side, I've had a much better experience when there's realtors involved. Um, the
It
advice,
is.
the negotiation help, especially like, cause we do a lot with first time home buyers. Sometimes they need their hands held. And especially some of our agents that are experts in neighborhoods and they know the schools, they know like everything there is to know about the specific home that our buyers are buying. Um, I can't imagine
I think
working
you're
without.
exactly right. Like it's the value that they give you. Like any industry, there are people that don't have as great as value, and they just get licensed and hope and pray it's going to work out. But the agents that are out there that are actually in their job, in their career, know the neighborhoods, know the contracts back and forth, are always educated on things that are actually providing value to the sellers and to the buyers, you definitely need them. That's never going to go away. Their value is just irreplaceable.
Right.
Um, but like you said, yeah, could you? You could. I mean, you can represent yourself in a
Anything's
murder trial too
possible.
if you wanted to. So
Yeah.
that's you have that right to represent yourself you want to, but it's not something even though I see it every single day, I still would use a realtor. I,
Yeah. I mean, we know a lot about mortgages, buying and selling real estate. So if I were to list my house today, I would still use a realtor. Even
yep,
though I know enough that I could do it myself, I would still use a realtor. But that's just me.
I definitely
All
need them.
right.
So let's go on to mortgages. Are fixed rate mortgages always the best?
Well, that's kind of going to depend. It's just a loaded question. There's so many different variables. So the best mortgage type depends on the home buyer's financial situation, how long they plan to stay in the home. Um, there's just so many different variables that can make, adjustable rate mortgage more appealing than a fixed rate mortgage. So, it really depends on those financial goals. Stephen, what's your take?
I think it is the same. I think right now a lot of the unless you're in the jumbo market, a lot of the arms, the adjustable rate mortgage and a fixed rate are basically almost the same interest rate wise. There's really
Yeah, you're
not,
not like right now in our current market, you're not getting a
yeah.
lower rate for an arm than a 30-year fixed.
So most people are
So,
like, well, why would I risk it? Like I'll just go with the 30-year fix. It's the same thing. So why would
right.
I? Now you get into certain markets where a jumbo loan product where it would actually make more sense for them. And so it could be it. We kind of weigh out the numbers like, okay, well, it's a 5-1 arm, which means in the first 5 years it's fixed. And then after that, every year it'll adjust. And they have to make that decision. Okay, will I be here the next 5 years? Will I have this mortgage the next 5 years, or will I refinance it, sell the house, whatever? And that's basically on them, like
Right.
what they decide to choose with it. We can only
Well, and
run the
then
numbers and show them.
so I've also had buyers that didn't qualify like our traditional route, but we have an investor that's awesome that we were able to qualify them with. And that investor does nothing but arms.
Yeah,
So then like we found a solution that allows you to purchase the home, you know. Um, so again, completely depends on the buyer's, individual situation.
exactly. So yeah, that's whatever they decide on that would be there. So also with that is, should you always go 30 years? Because people don't realize is you don't have to have a 30-year mortgage. Everybody thinks it's a 30-year mortgage, no matter
No,
what.
there's 25, 20, 15, 10s. Is it a 5-year mortgage?
There's
I don't
yeah, there are like specialty. It's a 5 year with a balloon usually.
gotcha. I've never done one of those. So I didn't
Yeah.
want to don't quote me. Yeah, I mean, again, financial situation. If you can afford the 30 but can't afford a 15, obviously you're not going to do a 15. If you could afford both, well, then we've got to see what the benefits are to the 15. Typically, it's going to be a lower interest rate. Um, and we want it to be, I mean, somewhat significantly lower so that, your savings are just that much more. There was a certain point in the market last year where 15-year rates were the same as a 30-year interest
Yes.
rate. So to me, why would you do it? Why would you lock yourself into a higher payment with a 15-year mortgage when you can get the same interest rate for a 30 and just simply pay your mortgage like a 15? You just add the extra towards your principal every single month and you just created a 15-year mortgage plan. But if something were to happen, then you could always fall back on your 30-year mortgage. Now, if your interest rate for 30 is, and I'm just throwing out random interest rates, but let's just say the interest rate for a 30-year fixed is 7, and the interest rate for a 15-year fixed is 5.99. That's going to be significant savings, especially when you consider you're going to pay the house off 15 years earlier. So if you can afford that and the savings are there, yeah, by all means.
Yep.
Sounds like a great plan. But the 30-year mortgage is not your only option, and it doesn't mean that it's always your best option.
Exactly. You have to look at the numbers and decide which one is better with you, kind of thing. And what people also don't realize is mostly any mortgage you do, if you have enough money, like you're saying on the 30 year paying it like a 15, you could eventually go back to the servicer of your mortgage and say, hey, I've got this much more equity into it now. Can I do a recast and recast your mortgage to a lower payment? So I think a lot of people don't understand that. So like a recast is taking your current mortgage and spreading the payments back out, because you put a lump sum in, you put a lot of money in throughout the year. So when you're recasting it, you're saying, hey, I want to, because if you put extra money in, your principal goes down, but your payment doesn't go down. Your payment stays the same. It takes years off the loan, so you will pay less over time. You'll have less payments, but your actual payment will stay the same. When you recast it, you put so much money into it already that you are saying, hey, I've already lowered my principal so much on this. I want to recast it and spread that principal over the life of the loan now.
And that's where, so let's just say you bought a home and you've been paying your mortgage for 3 years and you did a significant principal you're planning to do a significant principal reduction. After 3 years, you should have, so if you've been making payments for 3 years, that means you've made 36 payments. So you should have 324 payments remaining on a 30-year mortgage. The recast takes that large principal reduction and then re-amortizes over 324 payments. So that's how you're getting the smaller payment. If you were to just refinance, you're going to start that process over 360 payments.
Yeah.
So that's the idea of the recast, is large principal reduction, and then re-amortize over the remaining amount of months. So, and I feel like we've mentioned this. It's almost like every other episode or so that we bring up a recast. Apparently, Stephen and Derick are fans of recasts.
So people know we make $0 on recasting. It just, to certain people, it makes financial sense to do it. And I'm like, ask them, ask you whoever's doing your, currently servicing your mortgage, if you can do it, especially if you're putting a big chunk in, kind of thing. And these are things that we look at as loan officers to see how we can benefit the client, even if it means nothing for us, kind of thing. If it's recasting your mortgage to lower your payment, if it's, hey, you need to at least adjust your taxes or your insurance or whatever to do it, that's what our job is, to help you out with it.
All right. And then last mortgage myth or home buying myth: you should try to buy the worst house in the best neighborhood. We're making eek faces right now.
I've
Steven,
always heard.
I mean, I understand somebody's thought process behind it, in the hopes of renovating, probably.
There there is a method to the madness on that. Should it be followed all the time? No. Um, I think like we've always been saying, it depends on your situation. Like you just said, like, hey, I like to buy the crappy house in the neighborhood and fix it up. And now it's going to be because the other good houses are bringing up its value naturally. And so once I fix it up, like it's going to have a better value.
Well, okay, so think about like you're a neighborhood where homes are worth 500,000 and there's a dilapidated house that you could purchase for 200. Then it depends on how much money it's going to take to bring it to, a $500,000 value.
Yeah.
If it's, if you could buy it for 200 and it will take 300,000, no, bad idea. If you could buy it for 200,000 and it'll cost $100,000 in renovations to get it to that $500,000 mark, that might be a great investment. Because then you've got a $500,000 home that you put $300,000 into. So it really depends. Really depends. And if that's the case, because I've seen it before where there's like a very nice neighborhood and something happened like with a family, usually, like a death or something like that. Or potentially like it was somebody's second home and then they couldn't afford it. So then they just let it go and went into foreclosure and nobody was upkeeping it. So it might just be simple maintenance, but if it really like go back and get a home inspection, because it's really going to depend on where that home is at, what would take, to renovate it, make it livable, what that looks like.
Exactly. And I want to put a little caveat in there is we do renovation loans for people too. So we can do it off
Say
of
that again, Stephen. What?
Why not? What? We
Say that
do
again?
renovation loans.
Hey.
People don't realize. So what's great about that process too is you're buying the home and you can get a lot of your cost put into the mortgage because we're going to go off of what it's worth once it's completed. Now,
Right.
it's not what you tell us. Like there's a GC that's higher, there's estimates, like there's professional.
We get a lot of, well, we do the numbers up front.
Yeah. So we get it all up front. But like you're saying in your case right there, hey, it's 200,000. It'll cost 100,000, 200,000 to fix up. Well, but it'll be worth 500 when it's done. We can give you a loan for 400,000 to do it. And technically at the end of it, you got 100 grand of equity in that house now.
Right.
Now, like I said, there's more stipulations and we'll do a podcast to go more in detail with it, but like it can make financial sense for somebody that maybe they want that $500,000 house and they just can't find it. So they find something that's a little less and have the work done.
Well, and I think that we see a lot of times with flips. I mean, let's call it that. It's either a flip or a renovation product or whatever. But most of the time, the cheap house is bought by somebody that does flips, by a GC or whatever, or they hire a company. And then the renovation portion, a lot of times is paid for out of pocket. You know what I mean? Or a hard money loan could be different. But renovations, that's where you might be able to buy this house with, 5 or 10% down. And then all those costs of renovating are within the loan amount.
Yeah.
Not out of pocket expenses. So definitely one thing to consider. But to sum up that mortgage myth, should you buy the worst house in the best neighborhood? Loaded question, loaded answer. There's not a perfect answer. It really depends on your finances, what that looks like, the cost of renovation, the final appraised value, just all those numbers. It comes down to numbers.
I'll say this.
Does it make sense?
Will Stephen do it? Yes.
Will Derick do it?
Will Nikki, Stephen's wife, do it? No, so Stephen won't do it.
Yeah. So that's where I was going to go too, because sometimes I could see it. Although I think my wife would let me do it with a GC as long as I wasn't 100% invested. If I was doing it with like a partner that has done it before, she would feel more comfortable. I think that's where we are.
Not the handyman.
I'm not a handyman. No. All right. Any other myths you can think of, Stephen?
Double check what we went over. I think that's really. Do you need perfect credit? No. Do you need 20% down? No. Is renting always throwing away money? No. Upfront cost is just a down payment? No. Can you buy a home? Did we go over this? You can't buy a home if you have debt.
No, I think we skipped over that one. So you can't buy a home if you have debt. Not true. I would say 99% of my buyers have bought a home with debt. Obviously, your debt to income ratio is definitely going to be a factor for your ability to purchase.
Yeah.
But I have only had a handful of customers that truly had no debt other than the new home they were purchasing.
Yeah, I think very rarely. I mean, usually, even the ones that do, it's like they have a small credit card. I mean, like might be like $25 a month, and they only have
Right.
$300 on it, kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah, it's very rare that somebody not really have not a lot of debt, but that has like no debt at all with it. I will say the
Right.
biggest one right now, because student loan payments were basically
In deferment for 3 years.
yeah, in deferment for 3 years. So people thought those didn't have to count. Hey, I don't have a bill, so they don't count. Well, they still count it. If it's deferred,
Yep.
depending 90, I would say 90% of the time we have to count if it's deferred at a certain a half a point of the student loan amount we have to count as your monthly payment. There's certain ones that's a little higher. There's certain programs, depending on the student loan, that we don't have to count it at all, depending on everything. But now that student loans have to be paid and they're coming back and these payments are coming up, like I think that's waking up a lot of people to realizing what they thought their debt to income ratio really is. Now, I have seen it where the 0.5% is higher than what their actual student loan payment is. So it could technically help them too, where
Right.
maybe we had to charge $100 a month in our calculations, but their payment's only $30 a month. Well, go off
Right.
the 30 if it's on the credit report. So
Right. Yeah. No, you can definitely buy a house with that. All right.
went over home inspections, get one.
Yeah.
Home prices are negotiable. You do need
Correct.
a real estate agent. I don't think that's ever going to go away. Fixed rates are not always the best, depending on your situation. There's different options. Our 30-year. And then we went over the should you always buy the worst house? So yeah, I think we covered basically the majority of the myths that are out there.
So if any listeners out there, have a mortgage or home buying myth that they heard and they want, our opinion on it, let us know. We'd be happy to either debunk it or prove it right. But for everybody listening, thanks for joining us. I'm Derick Brown. This is Stephen Brock, and this is our podcast. We're
Brutally
16
honest.
episode, the Brutally Honest Loan Officer podcast, and I think we are like 16 episodes in now.
Yes.
Look at that.
You're getting it. All right.
All right.
Thanks,
Well,
everybody.
thanks for joining us. See you next time. Oh, and make sure to like and share. Are we supposed to say that stuff?
Yeah, we're supposed to. We're not very good at this call to action thing.
I just like doing the podcast. I'm not necessarily doing it for followers and stuff. So I don't know.
But they're nice.
Yeah.
They are nice.
All right.
Hey.
Thanks,
All
buddy.
right. See ya.
See ya.